Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to be going over my top 5 tips I think every single Senna player needs to know. Now, my goal behind this video is to make you a better League of Legends player as well as to give you a better understanding of the champion as a whole. I put timestamps at every single point in my video. That's going to be up at the top if you want to skip the intro, as well as the scrolling bar is going to be segmented into the different sections of tips. If you already have a good understanding of one tip, I just heavily encourage you to look down at the scrolling bar and go over to the next tip. Now, if you want to contact me directly with any questions, I try to be as interactive with you guys as possible. I'm going to put a link to my Twitch as well as my Discord down below in the pinned comment, so make sure to check that out. And with all that out of the way, let's jump into tip number 1. Alright, and getting into tip number 1 for Senna, a extremely effective trading pattern that you can look to utilize in your lanes. It is going to be taking full advantage of the Glacial Augment slow as well as your root. Now, you want to start off the trade by just proccing your Curse of the Black Mist just so you can get into a very good position to throw out your autos and your W. So, a basic trading pattern is going to look something like this. You proc your E, you go auto Q, auto W, auto R. So you're weaving an auto attack in between every single one of your abilities. You're using the Glacial Augment slow to increase the accuracy of your last embrace, and you're using the root from your last embrace to guarantee the damage from your Dawning Shadow. You're using the Curse of the Black Mist to get in the best possible position to auto attack the enemy and chase them down and or block, and then obviously you're using the auto attack or the slow from the Glacial Augment to get in range for your Piercing Darkness and just provide as much damage as possible. If you have any questions about this basic trading pattern, please hit me up in the comments down below. I really enjoy helping you guys out, and that will wrap up tip number 1. Alright, and getting into tip number 2, the reason why I really just started picking up this champion is because of her flexibility and the really fun, cheaper build that you can look to play when you are playing Senna. Now, I think the absolute best mythic currently for Senna is Eclipse, because of your ability to get a little bit of tankiness through Omnivamp and the shield that is provided, as well as a bit of chase down potential with the movement speed is going to be great, as well as your ability to proc it extremely quickly with just a auto Q. So Eclipse is a go-to, and it has great components with the Serrated Dirk and just buying a crap ton of different longswords. Now, it is rather important that you do go a Muramana build if you are struggling with mana issues. Sometimes you can get away with not using Muramana if you are going Presence of Mind, but it is a great item. Now, outside of that item, or those two items, you really can go extremely flexible. That is what I really like to look for in champions. The more flexible they are with their overall build, I think the better they are in the current meta, because you are able to adapt for different situations. Now, I'm going to go over a couple very key items that you can look to utilize when you are playing Senna. Now, the Collector is a great snowball item because it provides both lethality and crit. An insane amount of damage comes out of these lethality crits that you can proc when you are playing Senna, as well as it gives you a bit more gold if you are consistently team fighting in those situations. So always look to pick up the Collector if it fulfills 2 different criteria. First of all, there are a lot of skirmishes, so you can take a full advantage of the passive of Death and Taxes, as well as you are snowballing and you do not really need any defensiveness when you are playing Senna. Now, next up, I want to talk about the power of Edge of Night. Having a spell shield is absolutely huge on Senna, particularly in these scenarios. Now, if you are playing against a lot of pick, things like Ashe, things like Thresh, things like Fizz, things like Sejuani, that look to just hit you with a high impact ability, like a Fizz ultimate, a Thresh hook, or a just a big CC on you, Edge of Night is a must buy when you are playing her. Now, next up, Black Cleaver is great for your team because it provides a lot of armor shred, as well as the new passive Butcher, where against fully shredded enemies you deal an additional 5% missing health on the target, is extremely effective, and you can get it to a pretty decent point because your Q can proc the Black Cleaver shred, and it gives you attack damage, health, and ability haste. So all very strong item stat line. It is a bit expensive, but it is a go-to when you are playing against a lot of enemy tanks. If you are playing against an Enchanter, if you're playing against a shield heavy team, things that come to mind are maybe a Seraphine, Vayne in the bot lane, a Karma, a Ivern in the jungle, just shields everywhere. Serpent's Fang can be extremely effective. It has a nice stat line of attack damage lethality and really helps you be a bit of a shield buster. Now, if you are snowballing and you're just getting very, very far ahead, things like Youmuu's to help increase your pick potential can be very effective. Next up, this is a pretty much must buy in my opinion as a third or fourth item because its ability to really have that little bit of extra range as well as that movement speed is such a premium for Senna because of her rather slow base movement speeds. It is very nice to get a little bit of chase down potential with your movement speed. That's why I like running approach velocity and just getting a lot of extra speed running at people. Now, she's very, very flexible. As I said, with items, you can go things like Essence Reaver, you can go things like Lord Dominic's Regards into a bunch of different tanks. You can go Ravenous Hydra if you want to just do a lot of AoE damage and get a crap ton of Omnivamp. If you guys have a really fun, exciting off-meta build, maybe you're running a tank kind of Senna build with Divine Sunder, let me know in the comments down below, and that will wrap up my tips for Senna. All right, and getting into tip number 3, we are going to talk about team fighting and where Senna can really shine. Now, she really does well in these front-to-back team fights where she can consistently shoot out long-range autos and help provide peel for the other backline champions. Now, you should always be looking to throw out your last embrace on high-value targets that are jumping in and being divers on the enemy. Now, if there aren't any divers, which is very rare in the Season 11 meta because there are a lot of assassins, you just want to look to use your last embrace on the enemy front line and just get as much damage down on them as possible and maybe catching them out in really poor positions when they are trying to run away or reposition and regather in a different area. So when you are playing in team fights, you want to be looking to use your Curse of the Black Mist to help increase the movement speed and dodge potential of your allies, as well as to give them a little bit of protection from auto attacks if they are not throwing out a lot of their abilities. And then obviously using your Piercing Darkness for a little bit of damage and a little bit of healing and trying to maximize that with hitting as many targets as possible. Next up, throwing Dawning Shadows is an extremely important part that can really be the reason you lose or win a team fight. So what you're looking for and the timing you're looking for when you are throwing out your Dawning Shadow is for a commitment. This is something like a Maokai Wing in. This is something like a Malphite Ring in, where you have guaranteed frames of where the enemy is going to be and where your allies are going to be, so you can get the maximum potential of both a large amount of shielding and a large amount of damage going off in the certain team fight. So always look for those really big engagements. You don't want to be just throwing this out at the start of the fight when people can still run away. You always want to look for commitment when you are throwing out your Dawning Shadow. If you have any questions about team fighting and Senna, hit me up in the comments down below. All right, and getting into tip number 4, we are going to talk about a great way to get a couple of very unexpected picks on the enemy, and that is by throwing out a root on an enemy minion that is a very low health or that you can one-shot in the backline and instantly proc your W. This is going to be extremely effective in both laning phase and during siege scenarios where you can throw out a W from Fog of War on a minion that you can kill instantly with your W and proc it on a bunch of targets that are looking to pressure your tower. I can't tell you how important this is. I know it seems rather small, but I very rarely see this people utilizing this to its full effect. So always be looking for those really sneaky W roots. A lot of the times people think they are safe from your root when they're hiding behind minions, but that is absolutely not the case if they are right on top of the minions. And that will wrap up tip number 4. Alright, and getting into the final tip with Senna, we're going to go over a little bit more advanced things when you are playing this champion. Now, if you did not know, when you are playing Senna, you can proc your Q on pretty much anything. You can proc it on a Scryer's Bloom. You can proc it on a Blast Plant. You can proc it on a Honey Fruit. You can proc it on a Ward. Now, this last one, being able to proc it on a Ward is rather important because on the really high end, you are able to do some very fancy plays by augmenting both the direction of which way you're throwing out your Q and the overall range that you can reach enemy targets when there is no other target around. You're out of range of Q on your enemy, but you want to hit a target here. Throwing down a ward can be the difference between getting a kill and a pick on an enemy, because it procs your glacial augment, does a little bit of extra damage. It is going to be something that separates pretty good Sennas from great Sennas. So what you want to do is just go in practice tool, get used to maybe doing really flashy plays, maybe doing a flash and then putting down your ward and then queuing, obviously doing that extremely quickly, getting it into a very fluid motion where you're able to extend your Q range and look for those really nice picks in the late game. Now that's going to wrap up my tips, guys. If you have any questions for me, you can hit me up in the comments down below, and as always, take it easy.